everyone, ReeferGil here. In today's video we're going to install this Bulk Reef Supplies dual reactor onto my manifold. Then in true ReeferGil fashion we're going to give this reactor a facelift. I'll be installing this dual reactor on the right side of my sump and flowing water into it using my manifold. The ball valves coming off the manifold are 3/4 inch. The inlet hose on the reactor itself is a 1/2 inch. So to make this work I need a 1/2 inch push connect fitting and a 3/4 inch to a 1/2 inch reducer. I went with the slip to female threaded reducer. The fitting will be glued into the ball valve's union. The portion that slips into the ball valve is 3/4 inch and the other end is a female 1/2 inch threaded insert. Then I'll take the 1/2 inch push connect fitting and thread that into the reducer. It sounds way more complicated than it really is. I removed the union fitting from the ball valve and brought it downstairs with the reducer. I applied clear PVC primer to the slip end of the reducer and into the inside of the union. After applying clear PVC glue to both parts, I inserted the reducer into the union and firmly pressed down to ensure a proper fit. Then I took the 1/2 inch push connect fitting and applied some Teflon tape to the threads. I hand tightened the push connect fitting into the reducer, then used a pair of pliers off camera to seat the push connect fitting all the way down. I had my local plastic shop make me this reactor stand in order for the reactor to have enough height to run the hoses into the sump. Of course, I used some orange acrylic for the stand's platform. Unfortunately, I had to turn the reactor around so that the back of the reactor was facing the sump. I found this was the best way to get a clean connection from the reactor's inlet hose into the push connect fitting on the manifold. Eventually, I will mount the reactor against the side of the stand, but I wanted to get the GFO and carbon going to deal with some green hair algae that I'll discuss in a future video. I pushed in the inlet hose into the push connect fitting we just installed on the manifold. I went ahead and opened up the ball valve on the manifold and started up the reactor. I placed a bucket underneath the outlet hose as I needed to flush out the newly added media. I did do a video on how to replace the media inside these reactors. A link to that will be down below in the description. Here's what the dirty water looked like coming out of the reactor. I still have the option of using this 1/2 inch ball valve on the reactor's inlet for any fine tuning if I needed. Here's a shot of the rate that I like my GFO to tumble at. It's just a slight tumble. You want to be careful not to overdo this because the GFO can actually break apart and become fine dust that will then get into your water column. Now if you've had a sump for any period of time, then you know how quickly it can become cluttered. By using a manifold to direct flow into that piece of equipment eliminates the need to have an independent pump to run that piece of equipment. By eliminating the need to have an independent pump to run pieces of equipment in your sump, it frees up an outlet, reduces heat in your water, reduces the chances of stray voltage in your tank, and it's one less piece of equipment that needs to be replaced or maintained. Running a manifold in your aquarium's plumbing has more advantages than disadvantages in my opinion. The only real disadvantage to running a manifold is when the media becomes clogged or old, the flow through the manifold becomes affected, requiring you to either replace the media or adjust the flow into your overflow to prevent it from gurgling. The reactor is working perfectly, but something is amiss here. There's something out of place here. Something isn't sitting well with me. Screw it, let's do this. I took the reactor offline and brought it downstairs. I unscrewed the 2 canisters and set those aside. It's time to give this reactor a facelift like no one's ever seen before. That's right, it's time to bust out the Rust-Oleum spray paint for plastics in orange and gray. Before I start going and slapping some paint on a piece of equipment, there's a couple of considerations I want to take into account. First, I don't want to spray paint any internal portions of the equipment, especially any moving parts. My first consideration is to protect the piece of equipment I'm painting from any paint getting into its internals. My second consideration is to avoid painting any parts making direct contact with the aquarium's water. Also, consider the fact by painting any piece of equipment that you've just gotten is going to void the warranty, so take that into consideration as well. Lastly, I want to protect any portions of the equipment where there are hose fittings and threads. I don't want my OCD to interfere with the way the equipment was intended to work. After removing these plastic thumb screws with an 8mm socket, I was able to separate the reactor's bracket from the canister holder. I decided to paint the bracket with gray spray paint. I rinsed off the bracket off camera and thoroughly wiped it down to remove any dirt and moisture. When it came to the Bulk Reef supply sticker on the bracket, it was a must to keep it. After all, the sticker was going to make the whole thing look authentic in my opinion. I took careful precautions to save the sticker and taken the time by covering it with some tape. Once that was all cleaned up and dried off, I laid out some cardboard and went to town on the bracket. I applied the first coat of paint and started getting really excited. This was going to be an awesome paint scheme to fit my Neptune Systems overall paint theme. I really think Bulk Reef Supply deserves a huge shout out. What they have been doing for this hobby is absolutely incredible. Not only does Ryan have a one-stop shop for aquarium supplies, but he and his crew spend countless hours bringing us some top-notch reef-related videos. If it wasn't for these guys, my journey into this hobby could have gone down the wrong path very easily. So a big thank you to BRS, keep doing what you guys do. Next, I prepare the canister holder of the portion of the reactor. There are two 90-degree push connect fittings attached to either side of the reactor. I was going to remove these and paint them gray, but I thought it looked just as good in orange, so I left them on. To protect the inside of the push connect fittings, I installed some scrap 1/2-inch hose to prevent the paint from getting inside the fittings. Then I took some painter's tape and carefully applied that over the threads to prevent painting those. Protecting any parts that can leak if altered with something like paint is important. This was not designed to be painted, so taking the extra time to protect those sort of areas is of high priority to me. After applying the painter's tape around the threads, the reactor looked like this. Now that the bottom portion of the reactor was ready for paint, I set it down on the cardboard. I thought painting this part of the reactor orange would give it a nice contrast against the gray bracket. I started spray painting the canister holder orange, ensuring that I got every piece with paint. I'm really starting to see how this paint scheme is going to take shape. It's going to really complement the rest of the system and look like it was made to be in my sump. After applying the first coat of paint, I set it aside. I have two black 90-degree push connect fittings, one that will be attached to the inlet hose and one that will be attached to the outlet hose. I grabbed some scrap 1/2-inch hose and inserted it into both ends of the fittings. I cut a couple of holes on top of a cardboard box and used it to prevent having to lay down the fittings on their sides. I went with gray to paint the black fittings. A few squeezes of the spray paint and both were done with their first coat in no time. I debated with myself on whether or not to paint the inlet hose. Of course, my OCD won that debate, so I went for it. I grabbed some 1/2-inch fittings and threw them on each side of the white 1/2-inch hose. I did this to prevent painting that portion of the hose that goes into the fitting. I grabbed my orange paint and spray painted the hose. It actually turned out pretty nice. In the end, I was glad I decided to paint it. As for the black outlet hose, I decided to leave this one alone. Black is part of the Apex color theme, plus the hose would be partially submerged in water. When it came to the 1/2-inch ball valve that came with the reactor, I used a screwdriver and removed the screw holding the valve. I took a look inside and noticed that I had exposed the seal. I used some paper towels and shoved them in to protect the seal from being painted. Although the housing on the ball valve was already gray, it was a light gray and it didn't match the darker gray I was using. I painted the housing of the ball valve, then I turned my attention on the turquoise valve. I placed that down and painted it orange. After about 3 or 4 coats and allowing the paint to dry, I reassembled the reactor and it ended up looking like this. I think the BRS reactor is going to add some flair to the tank while still removing phosphates and clearing up the water at the same time. Unfortunately, the best way I found to connect the reactor was with the reactor facing backwards. This meant the sticker I spent time on saving wasn't even visible. After a few days of staring at the back of the reactor's bracket, I decided to come up with a temporary fix. So I decided to remove the bracket and flip it around so that the front of it was facing the sump. I'll have to remember I did this because the sticker actually indicates where the GFO canister is supposed to go and where the carbon canister is supposed to go. When I refill these canisters, I'll have to place the GFO under where the sticker indicates carbon. Eventually, I will mount the reactor on the side of the stand and flip the bracket back into its original position, but until then, this will do. Here's a shot of how the reactor's colors work with the rest of the sump. So what do you guys think? Leave your comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I enjoyed making it. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscription button. Follow me on Instagram, the link is down below in the description, and don't forget to hit that like button. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next Sunday.